Hello, everyone. How are we doing today? So, today we are starting the reproductive system, which is the last chapter of the course. So, in this chapter, we're going to be going over the male and female reproductive system. So, we're going to break this up into two videos. First video here is going to be the male reproductive system and talking about the sexual characteristics and hormonal control in the male system. And then the next video will be going into the female reproductive system, talking about the same stuff except the female version. And then the last video will go a little bit into embryonic development, and then a little bit into inheritance and Punnett squares. You might have heard of those before. They might be new. And a little bit into genetic disorders as well. Alrighty. So in the first video here, again, we're going into the male reproductive system. So we're going to identify male reproductive structures and their functions. We're going to explain the process and locations of meiosis. So here, we've talked about mitosis before in an earlier chapter. Now we're going to do a refresher here of mitosis in relation to meiosis. So it's similar but different. Then we're going to distinguish between primary, secondary, and accessory sexual characteristics and the importance of testosterone. And speaking of testosterone, the hormonal control of reproductive cycles in males. So here, just a general overview of male reproductive structures and functions. Of course, you know, the penis is the extension of the male reproductive system. It's surrounded by some muscle tissue here. So the corpus cavernosum and the corpus spongiosum. The cavernosum fills with blood during an erection, and the corpus spongiosum does as well to keep the urethra open. So this is the part that goes through the spongiosum is known as the spongy urethra. And then you follow that back, then back here it's called the membranous urethra. And then as you go back through, it's near the prostate. So back here is a gland known as the prostate gland that secretes some fluids and for the production of semen. Over here in black and white is the bladder. So here's where the urine comes out, and from there on out, it's all urine. Behind the prostatic urethra is then the ejaculatory duct, which travels all the way back, connects with another gland called the seminal vesicle right here, or vesicle, and then all the way up, and we get what's known as the ductus deferens or the vas deferens traveling all the way down. So there's the vas deferens. That's what gets snipped during a vasectomy, and then comes all the way down to the testes, where it goes into the epididymis. This is the tail of the epididymis, and then the body and the head of the epididymis. The epididymis is where sperm is stored. Sperm is then made in the testes. So sperm are made down here in these testes. We'll talk about that production. They get stored then in the epididymis during ejaculation. Then the epididymis squeezes, releases the sperm out the vas deferens through the ejaculatory duct, through the ampulla, and then it collects fluid from the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, and these pairs of bulbourethral glands down here as well. And then so all that then joins together, so you get the sperm and the secretions of the three glands, then form semen for an ejaculation. So that's the overall male reproductive system anatomy. And also, one difference here is the scrotum here, the testes lie outside the body. And one reason for that is the sperm actually mature and better at that lower temperature outside the body compared to inside. So ovaries in females are synonymous with male testes, but testes descend in females are held up by ovaries are held up by a broad ligament. So this is a general overview of the male reproductive system. Again, we'll do the same thing, but for the female reproductive system in the next lecture. Now, if we go into those testes a little bit more, here we can see those seminiferous tubules. So there's these different lobules in the testes, and there's this collection of tubules. They're called seminiferous tubules, and that is where sperm are produced. So sperm are produced in these tubules in the presence of testosterone. Testosterone encourages sperm production, and then they work their way out via the straight tubule through the rete testes, which is this interconnectin area, and then the efferent ductule to the body of the epididymis. Up here is the head, down here is the tail, and then this is where it then pushes out and goes that way. So that's just the general overview of the interior structure of a testes. So now, if we look at one of those seminiferous tubules in a testes and look at a cross section of it, here is where sperm are being made. So here are the early spermatids. They're called, well, the stem cells are called the spermatogonium. So these are stem cells. They divide, they send one down, and then one stays up here. And that can divide again, send one down, and then stay. So there's always one that stays up here. And what happens is as these sperm cells work their way down, they go through the different rounds of mitosis. So there's a lot of differences between, meiosis. Meiosis in males and females. Males go straight through meiosis and produce sperm. Females stop at different stages in meiosis. Females are also born with all the eggs they're going to have, whereas males are constantly producing new sperm throughout life. So the purpose of meiosis is to produce or to take a 2N diploid cell and to make a 1N haploid cell. You must make a 1N haploid cell for that when fertilization occurs, you get 1N plus 1N equals 2N. And then a 2N is what the number of chromosomes you want. That's haploid. So here would be the sperm, and then this would be the egg. So the egg also needs to be 1N. Eggs are called oocytes. So that's what meiosis does. Meiosis also causes genetic diversity in the gametes. So down here, sperm and eggs are known as gametes. So here, when this stem cell divides, it goes through mitosis, produces a primary spermatocyte, and like I said, one stays. Then it enters meiosis 1. So mitosis, we have prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, if you remember those cycles. Meiosis 1 and meiosis 2 each have prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. However, they do differ in how the chromosomes separate. So in meiosis 1, we go from a diploid cell 2N to a haploid cell 1N. And the chromosomes, what they do during this, so if I draw one chromosome pair right here, so here would be, let's say, one from your father, so chromosome number 1. You have a pair from each parent. And there's father, and then there's mother. So one chromosome from each parent. These overlap, and when they overlap, they can actually exchange sequences with each other. So if I erase part of these here, and I make one blue and then the other one yellow here, they can exchange arms, and that makes them different than genetically. So here, these can mix a little bit. It's called crossing over. We're not going to get into great detail in it, but it does cause genetic diversity. When you go through mitosis, you produce cells that are genetically identical to the parent cell. When you go through meiosis, you produce cells that are variations, have a genetic variation. Same number of chromosomes, same gene sequences, number of nucleotides and whatnot, but you have different mixtures of your two parents, of your mother and father's chromosome pair number 1. Now, in meiosis 1, chromosome pairs separate. If we recall, in mitosis, during metaphase, sister chromatids separate and it pulls each arm to opposite side. So that's what happens in anaphase of mitosis. Metaphase 1 is different because these sister chromatids are held together. So this is what happens in meiosis 1. In meiosis 2, then, you then get this separation. Meiosis 2 is similar to mitosis. That's when sister chromatids separate. And we're not going to get down into the intricacies of like what defines this as being. So it would still be a haploid cell, and this is one chromosome, and this is one chromosome. That's why these ones are still 1N right here. But anyway, at this point, it's called a secondary spermatocyte, and then it finishes meiosis 2, and then you have cells that have half the number of chromosomes. So here, during this split, you get one to each side, and that splits that one chromosome into two going each way. Now, because you go through 2 rounds, one parent, primary spermatocyte, forms 4 spermatids, which then go through a process of spermiogenesis where they form a long flagella. So sperm are the only motile mammalian cell. They can move around. Well, they're only mammalian cell that has a flagella. They have a whole bunch of mitochondria wrapped around the midpiece, and up here is the head of the sperm, which contains the DNA. When the sperm fuses with the egg, the oocyte, all it does, there's a enzyme at the end. The head of it has an acrosome, has some enzymes at it that puncture the egg and then prevent other sperm from entering the egg, and then send the DNA into the egg, and that's when you then get 1N plus 1N equals 2N, and then this is called a zygote. So a zygote is then a fertilized egg, and then that fertilization has occurred. So here was your little rundown on meiosis as well. We'll talk about meiosis again when we get to females, but the key again for meiosis is you take a diploid, become a haploid, because when you get 2 haploid cells that are 1N, you then can create a diploid zygote during fertilization. If chromosome numbers are wrong in humans, humans don't survive. There's only one disorder where you could survive missing one of the chromosomes pairs. So say this pair wasn't here for number 1, this individual would not survive. Now you can have more, but missing one is a different state. We'll talk about that more when we get into disorders. All right, now back to what's going on with males here. So as sperm produce, they're assisted by these cells in here called Sertoli cells or sustentacular cells or sustenocytes. That's guiding them, and they're also interacting with testosterone during the production. Out here is interstitial tissue. Within that interstitial tissue, there are these cells called Leydig or interstitial cells. These cells produce something called androgen binding protein, which we'll talk about later. It binds testosterone and interacts with that. So we'll come across those coming up here in a second. Sperm in males are also, there's the blood testes barrier, because the immune system would detect sperm as being foreign, since sperm aren't made until puberty. So there's a barrier from the blood in your immune system getting to your testes. Alrighty, so this image here, we're only going to be talking about the male side right now. So this is just looking at primary, secondary, and accessory sexual characteristics. Primary sexual characteristics, that's just the organs themselves, so like the penis and the testes. Secondary then are for male, secondary then are what develop from the production of the hormones during puberty. So facial hair, deep voice, increased muscle mass, and so forth. Other things that are included down here, spermatogenesis begins. So production of sperm, penis, and scrotum grow, larynx elongates, so that deep voice, shoulders broaden, hair, and then, like I said, musculature. So that's all secondary, and that's due to testosterone production during puberty. And then accessory sexual characteristics are the glands. So like the seminal gland, prostate gland, and the bulbourethral glands. Bulbourethral glands are the one responsible for pre-cum, to say it easily. So those are a lubricating gland and also trying to get rid of any acidity of the vagina during intercourse. And then seminal and prostate glands, these are supporting the sperm. So giving the sperm nutrients like fructose, which are easy energy sources for them to survive. Again, this same image will come up next time when we talk about the female system. Now, last little bit here is hormonal control. This is much more simpler in males than females. The hormones we're talking about here are testosterone, LH, and FSH. LH is luteinizing hormone, FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. Yes, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone are still found in males, even though males don't technically have a luteal phase and follicular development for oocytes. So these are named according to females. But this goes back to the endocrine system. So up in the hypothalamus, you have cells that release GnRH. GnRH is gonadotropin releasing hormone, which travels down to the pituitary gland, so here in the anterior pituitary, causing the release of your gonadotropins. Gonadotropin releasing hormone releases gonadotropins. These gonadotropins are specifically FSH and LH. FSH and LH travel to the testes. LH specifically travels to those Leydig or interstitial cells. And then that causes them to release testosterone. And then Sertoli cells, FSH stimulates the Sertoli cells to release androgen binding protein. So here FSH comes in and interacts with those Sertoli cells. So here androgen binding protein, I think I mistakenly said the interstitial cells released it earlier. Androgen binding protein binds testosterone. So interstitial cells make testosterone, which binds, so an androgen binds testosterone. So ABP binds testosterone, keeping the latter at a high concentration, and that high concentration encourages sperm production then. So when testosterone is high, these Sertoli or supporting cells right here, cystenocytes, release something called inhibin. Inhibin comes up and inhibits the release of FSH and LH. High levels of testosterone also inhibit the release of GnRH and FSH and LH as well. So it's a negative feedback system. This is known as the HPG axis, hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So how you can communicate for sperm production. So it does get a little bit more detailed than that, and we'll talk about even more detail when we get to females. But this video here was only focused on males. The next one we'll talk about the female reproductive structures and accessory organs, and also the HPG axis and hormonal control that occurs in females as well, including the ovarian and uterine cycles. All right, that's all I have for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please let me know, and bye-bye.